The BBC invites you to comment on its proposals for an extended range of services for the licence payer as broadcasting moves into the digital age. For a copy of the consultation document, please write to the Secretary, Digital Service Consultation Document, BBC Broadcasting House, London W1A 1AA. You can also get a copy from the BBC website at bbc.co.uk/info. Your comments on the proposals need to be in by the 31st of March.
You might have thought that Nick Leeson lost his company a lot of money, but compared to the size of this man's losses, it was small beer, peanuts, loose change. The world's biggest single financial scandal manipulated global copper markets and cost one company alone $2.6 billion. And it was all due to one man acting alone. Or was it? Now a major Panorama investigation has uncovered other key players who made a few coppers themselves. Tomorrow, 9:30, BBC One.
The toppling of the Berlin Wall and the swift collapse of communism in Eastern Europe is recalled in 15 minutes here on BBC One in People's Century. The main evening news before that with Peter Sissons and Helen Rollison at 10:15.
The Daily Mail is accused of gross contempt of court for publishing the names of 5 men it says killed Stephen Lawrence. The former Master of the Rolls, Lord Donaldson, says the newspaper has interfered with the course of justice. The vote of censure on the Agriculture Minister, it looks as if the government will beat off Labour's attack. And the Chelsea own goal that keeps Leicester in with a chance against the Cup favourites. Good evening. One of Britain's most senior retired judges, Lord Donaldson, has strongly attacked the Daily Mail for naming 5 youths as the murderers of Stephen Lawrence. The former Master of the Rolls accused the newspaper of interfering with the course of justice, which he suggested was a gross contempt of common law, and he urged the Attorney-General to seek a ruling on the matter from the courts. The Attorney-General's office says it's considering Lord Donaldson's views carefully.
When the Daily Mail published these headlines identifying 5 men as the killers of Stephen Lawrence, Lord Donaldson said he reacted with horror. Channel 4 television then ran a documentary, including police surveillance footage of them showing one man wielding a knife. With civil cases still possible, Lord Donaldson said the media's action could prevent fair trials.
The action of the Daily Mail has without doubt interfered with the course of justice. I would hope that the Attorney-General would refer the matter to the courts at the earliest possible opportunity in order that the courts may consider whether this is a gross contempt of court.
The Attorney-General, Sir Nicholas Lyle, is to examine whether there has been contempt under the less used common law. The Daily Mail, however, still stand by their action. In a statement they said, "We are entirely satisfied that we have not committed any contempt, whether statutory or common law." Other lawyers agree, supporting what they see as the duty of the press to comment on the judicial process.
For many years, they have commented very valuably on convictions and brought their resources to bear when they believe there has been a miscarriage of justice, and it's led to many wrongs being righted. In this case, one newspaper has commented very forcefully on an acquittal. In principle, there is no reason why they should not comment on acquittals, which are just another part of the judicial process.
Meanwhile, Stephen Lawrence's family still hope to go ahead with their civil case to sue the men. Valerie Jones, BBC News.
The government appears tonight to be virtually certain of beating off tomorrow's vote of censure over its handling of the beef crisis. Labour hoped last week that a government defeat might be the first step in forcing an early general election. But the Ulster Unionists, whose votes are crucial, are increasingly critical of Labour's tactics. And even Tony Blair has acknowledged that the government can probably avoid defeat.
The ambulances will be back outside the Commons tomorrow night, ferrying in the sick for the crucial vote on whether to censure the Agriculture Minister, Douglas Hogg. Labour whips have spent the last few days making sure that not only do all their MPs turn out, but have been trying to maximise support among the other parties too. Today, though, Labour is playing down the prospects of victory.
I'm hopeful, quite frankly, that all the parties will vote with Labour tomorrow. I mean, the enormity of this issue, the scale of the crisis, the impact on the taxpayer and the consumer, and in particular in Northern Ireland, the damage to the industry. I'm hopeful we'll get a big vote tomorrow.
The Unionists will be the key to tomorrow's vote, but they're unimpressed at what they say is a stunt by the Labour Party.
Bluntly, I think that the opposition has got its timing wrong, it has got its objectives wrong, and it has got its relationship with other parties wrong. And that's not a good sign for the future.
I think it's the wrong issue, I think it's the wrong time, I think it's been done in the wrong way. I'm not going to lose an opportunity to vote if there's a possibility of defeating the government, and I ardently hope we shall do that.
There's a lot of talk of backroom deals having been done to save the government's skin. Not so, say ministers.
We've not bribed or bought off anyone, to my knowledge, and indeed I have no idea how the Ulster Unionists will vote in the division, but there will be a very good turnout of the Conservative Party to sustain the government.
There are two theories on the way Labour has handled this. One is that it was inept not to have brought the other parties on board before putting down the motion. The other is that irrespective of the outcome, Labour will have managed to put the BSE issue, John Major's poll tax they call it, back into the centre of the political debate. Both are probably correct. John Sopel, BBC News, Westminster.
And there'll be coverage of the censure debate in a special Westminster with Nick Ross tomorrow afternoon at 5:30 on BBC Two. And Newsnight will be on air with the result 10 minutes early at 10:20. The family of a 13-year-old girl who was murdered outside her home in Hastings yesterday say they've been worried about prowlers for months. Billy Jo Jenkins died from severe head injuries after she was attacked with a metal tent spike while painting a patio door. Her foster parents say they've seen a man watching the house on at least 2 occasions. Police are looking for a man seen in the area who has a scarred or bruised face. A 7th outbreak of fowl pest has been confirmed in Northern Ireland. The province's chief veterinary officer believes migrating wild birds are to blame. So far, 100,000 chickens have been slaughtered. Officials and farmers will decide tomorrow whether to vaccinate birds across the province.
At disease control in the Northern Ireland Department of Agriculture, each outbreak means a 10-kilometre restriction zone coming into operation. Even so, the disease has spread rapidly. All 7 outbreaks have occurred in just over a week.
It seems to be following the route of migratory birds. It has been a very bad winter in Eastern Europe, and birds have come further and further west looking for food, it would appear, and they brought the virus with them.
100,000 birds have already been slaughtered in Northern Ireland's worst outbreak of fowl pest since 1973. And stronger measures are now being considered, though a decision on province-wide vaccination of chickens has been deferred till tomorrow. But officials, farmers and the processing industry agree that there's no danger to humans.
No, this is a poultry virus. This is a poultry problem that we're speaking about. It is not, the meat itself is not harmful to the human population.
The poultry industry employs 5,000 people in the province, with 80% of its product exported. The consequences of the outbreak getting worse could be devastating. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Belfast.
Tutsi rebels in eastern Zaire are continuing to seize territory along the country's borders with Uganda, Rwanda and Burundi. Their leader, Laurent Kabila, has warned that his forces may attack the huge Rwandan refugee camp at Tingi. Our East Africa correspondent Martin Dawes has just returned from the rebel-held port of Kalemi on Lake Tanganyika.
Rebel leader Laurent Kabila, it seems, can do little wrong at the moment. His anti-government message appears popular, his army is taking swathes of territory, and his call for more soldiers is generating queues at recruitment offices. Nearly 4,000 potential soldiers train in the streets. Kabila, they sing, is hunting President Mobutu.
This is a country quickly being mobilised. What they lack in resources, they're making up for with enthusiasm. And it doesn't seem here as if there'll be a quick end to the war.
An astonishing array of weaponry was abandoned by the government army. Mr. Kabila believes such low morale will get him into the capital by June. But in the rebels' way is the massive refugee camp at Tingi Tingi, which is being armed by the Zairian government.
I think I must give them some 2-3 days to solve the problems. We shall hit badly this camp and kick everybody out.
In Kalemi, the dislocation of war is claiming casualties. A mother is buried in a new cemetery set aside for victims of cholera. 350 people have died from the disease in the past month. The hospital hasn't the medicines to cope with the disease that is common here. Martin Dawes, BBC News, Kalemi, Eastern Zaire.
2 unconventional church services of the kind recently condemned by the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Runcie, as pandering to youth culture have been held at Bradford Cathedral. Loud pop music, disco lighting and poetry readings were all employed in an attempt to broaden the appeal of the Church of England. Our religious affairs correspondent was there.
It's not what most people coming into a cathedral expect to see, but it's not really aimed at the sort of people who come to cathedrals or to any church. And if it can succeed in sharing the church's message with them, the organisers say, then they'll be well pleased. This was an attempt to speak to young people in a language they'd understand, using all the high-tech gadgetry of the entertainment industry. But afterwards, the cathedral authorities insisted it had been entertainment and something more.
It is worship, but it's bigger than normal worship. It's worship which is big enough to include entertainment, which is interesting, which is gripping, fascinating, mysterious, which is fun, which is silent, which brings tears and laughter all at the same time.
Last week, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Runcie, described some modern services as dreadful and dangerous. He said they seemed to reduce God to a puppet and were little more than the worship of candy-floss idols. But not all the church's traditionalists are outraged. Some say Bradford's experiment is worthwhile.
If I go to a Eucharist where there's a choir singing a Mozart Mass, then I worship, but I'm also entertained. So why shouldn't people be entertained by a different kind of music? We mustn't be too puritanical about our worship and imagine that if it's enjoyable, there's something wrong with it.
For many of those who came to the cathedral tonight, the experiment seems to have worked, and it's likely to be repeated. Alex Kirby, BBC News, Bradford.
Now, with news of cup football in England and Scotland and the latest Test cricket from New Zealand, here's Helen Rollason.
The favourites for the FA Cup, Chelsea, must replay their 5th round game after a spirited Leicester fight back at Filbert Street. 2 goals down at half-time, Leicester came back to win a 2-2 draw. In today's other tie, Sheffield Wednesday beat Bradford City.
If all eyes were on Gianfranco Zola, England's destroyer-in-chief at Wembley, it was another of Chelsea's Italian imports who made the first impression on this cup tie, when, against the run of play, Roberto Di Matteo danced through Leicester's defence to put the cup favourites ahead. Sadly, rather than admire such artistry, some spectators preferred to rekindle memories of English football's darker past. 10 were arrested after fighting briefly interrupted the game. Chelsea's growing authority wasn't interrupted though, and soon their speed of thought and superior passing brought them a second goal before half-time. Mark Hughes, the scorer. 2 down and without 7 first-team players, Leicester might have been forgiven for throwing in the towel, but not a bit of it. Steve Walsh's header 7 minutes after half-time gave them heart, and soon Chelsea, so comfortable in the latter stages of the first half, were noticeably rattled. Leicester's hustling created a series of chances before their feverish endeavour was rewarded 2 minutes from full-time, when the luckless Eddie Newton turned a free kick into his own net. A replay on Wednesday week was the least Leicester deserved. Earlier, First Division Bradford had fought gamely against Sheffield Wednesday of the Premiership, but in a frantic game of few chances, it was perhaps fitting that a deflected goal should give the senior side victory. A shot from Wednesday's Richie Humphreys going in off Bradford's Nicky Mohan. Duncan Jones, BBC News.
And Sheffield Wednesday's reward is a home game against Wimbledon in the quarter-finals. The winners of the Chelsea-Leicester replay will be away to Portsmouth. Middlesbrough must travel to either Derby or Coventry, but perhaps the most interesting part of the draw pits the 2 surviving second division teams together. Either Chesterfield or Wrexham will reach the semi-finals. And in the Scottish Cup, last year's runners-up Hearts drew 1-1 with Dundee United. In the second half, United's Ray McKinnon's free kick forced an own goal by Alan McManus. 15 minutes later, Hearts produced an equaliser when David Weir crossed and Jim Hamilton was there to finish off the move. The winners of the replay will meet Motherwell or Hamilton. Play is underway on the fourth day of the third test in Christchurch, New Zealand. New Zealand resumed on 95 for 6 in their second innings, 214 runs ahead, and England's bowlers have enjoyed early success.
The efforts of Mike Atherton and his bowlers have somehow hauled their side back into this game. Phil Tufnell picked up 2 late wickets yesterday, but today Matt Horne took the early initiative with a driven 4.
That's a lovely shot, all bottom hand.
But Horne, who was playing with a broken hand, soon had his resistance ended by Andy Caddick, who produced a fine delivery to claim the 7th New Zealand wicket.
Horne's resistance is over.
Caddick was in aggressive form and greeted 18-year-old Daniel Vettori, playing in his second test, with a bruising blow. But the young spinner had defied his opponents in the first innings and refused to be intimidated by England's attack. At the other end, Chris Cairns was in typically positive form with the bat. A short time ago, New Zealand had reached 135 for 7, a lead of 254. James Helm, BBC News.
And Greg Rosetsky meets the world #1 Pete Sampras in a few hours' time in the final of the Sybase Open in California after beating Andre Agassi in the semis in straight sets. Peter.
And that's all from the BBC Newsroom this weekend. From Helen and me, good night.
Good evening. A stormy spell of weather coming up. In fact, we already have an early warning of severe weather across the country for Monday. The greatest risk of severe gales in north...